I'm back, friends! Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Tori, and today I am so excited to mark the return to BookTube with my October wrap-up. So I took a break through the month of October off of YouTube and making videos, and that felt amazing. Honestly, you guys, I needed that break. I needed that breath and step back so badly. The situation with my grandfather is still really tough. He is declining into late stage Alzheimer's very quickly, and it's just been really heavy this last, honestly, summer watching that happen because he's one of my heroes. So it's been really good to kind of get a moment to step back, to focus on my family a little bit. I got through a lot of reading this month, which felt amazing. It was so nice to just sit and read whatever books I wanted to. I had some set reads that I talked about in my last video on the channel, but overall, it was nice to just grab stuff off the shelf, to finish up some books I've been working on for quite a long time, and just relax into the reading process and not feel like I had to constantly figure out how I was going to talk about it. But now we're here, and it's November, which is wild, and so we're going to talk about the books that I read in October. The first one was on my list of books that I was hoping to get to this month, and that was my Discord read-along for Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. This is my first time ever reading an Agatha Christie book, and I figured October was the perfect time to jump in. I really enjoyed this. It actually surprised me how much I enjoyed this because I wasn't really sure what to expect going in, never having read her work. And sometimes, you know how it is with classics, sometimes you never know if it's a classic just because the author was so prolific and so many people have read the book, or if it's really actually good. You know what I mean? And of course, every classic isn't going to be for every person, etc. This one actually pleasantly surprised me. I enjoyed her setting this kind of bleak gray atmosphere and just, you know, slowly pulling characters one by one until we get to the big reveal at the end. The kind of countdown trope of this novel I really enjoyed, and that's something that I actually think I'm going to seek out in further murder, mystery, and thriller novels because I really enjoyed that aspect of it. It kind of added a lot to the weight of the stakes. So the one thing I will say about this one, though, is I was able to guess the perpetrators very early on in the story, and I don't know that it changed my enjoyment of the story overall a ton, but it was just something where I knew what I was looking at pretty much through 2/3 of the story, if that makes sense. And I'm trying to keep it super spoiler free for y'all who haven't read it. But I really enjoyed this. I will definitely be picking up another Agatha Christie novel, and I would love to hear from you guys down in the comments below if you've read Agatha Christie, which ones I should look up after this. I have a few on my shelf still. I think I have Death on the Nile. I have Orient Express, I think. Murder on the... Yes, I think I have that one too. So I have a few of her works besides this one, so let me know in the comments which one you think I should go for next. Next up, I read Ordinary Grace by William Kent Kruger. This is my second read from this author, and I was really excited to discover a while back that he's actually a local author to me here in Minnesota, which is super cool. And I love the way that he elicits that historic, nostalgic, small town Minnesota atmosphere in the books that I've read from him so far. He captures that really well, and his character work, he does a great job building a cast of characters around the central conflict in a way where everybody feels like they belong there. All of the characters feel like they're purposeful, like he intended them to have lives off page, which sounds kind of dumb maybe, but you would be surprised how many authors kind of throw out the minor characters and the side characters, and they feel like they only exist to be on page in that moment, and then they just disappear. And he does a really good job with a well-rounded cast of characters. This is a story that follows two brothers during the 1960s, and some terrible, tragic things start happening in their small town that affect them to various degrees. And as we move through the story, it's really focused on the theme of grief and holding a family together through the face of adversity and tragedy. It really delves into the sociology of the small town, the politics, the hierarchies that exist between different families, and it's really well written in terms of atmosphere. The tone is very straightforward but beautiful, which I think is a fantastic combination for a story like this. When it came to the mystery of this book, I think the tragedies in and of themselves, I think, are the main anchor of this story. There were a few things about the mystery that happened toward the second half of this book that I felt like were a little convenient, a little lackluster. I wasn't as impressed with them as I was hoping to be. But I will say that I am continuing to enjoy Kruger's atmosphere, and I do have a couple more books from him that I really want to try. This Tender Land is the one I probably will try next. Ordinary Grace by William Kent Kruger was a priority read for me this year, actually, and I'm really happy to have finally read it. Next up, we did another kind of impromptu buddy read on my Discord, and that was for Bram Stoker's Dracula. This is a classic that's been on my priority reads list for ages, and I think I even asked you guys in a community poll like a year ago which classic I should prioritize, and out of the options I gave, Dracula won by, I think, a landslide. So I finally have read Dracula. This is a quintessential vampire novel, and again, October was the easy choice in terms of when to read this book this month. I have so many thoughts. I have so many thoughts about this book. I think there's a lot to unpack in this novel, and one of the things that I'll say about it first and foremost is I always am impressed when I find classics that I feel are more accessible for modern readers. I don't think that that's necessarily a prerequisite for a classic to be a good classic by any means, but I do think it helps to have kind of a repertoire of classic novels that I feel comfortable recommending to people that might not have the same level of experience in reading in general, reading classics, etc. And I do think that Dracula is a pretty accessible classic, which surprised me, honestly. I was expecting it to be a lot denser than it actually was. Something about Dracula I really enjoyed is that I think a lot of paranormal or horror kind of books, especially nowadays that feature werewolves, vampires, zombies, etc., we're in the grit and the horror, and we're like right face to face with it all the time so much in these more modern types of stories that I think what I enjoyed about Dracula was taking a step back and having that kind of distant horror that this book entails. We do obviously get a little bit up close and personal a couple times in the novel, but overall, I loved that kind of distant, tense mystery that existed, where there's a lot of the characters talking about how they're going to deal with Dracula and what's happening and trying to figure out his movements and what's going on. But it's very distant. He's kind of the terror of the unknown, I guess is how I would put that, is much more present in this book. And I actually really enjoyed that, because I do think sometimes we can get so many stories up close and personal with whatever horrors exist in the story that it kind of takes a little bit of that tense mystery, what's around the next corner, out of it. And I did really appreciate that about Dracula. Dracula himself, I think, the way he's written in this book is incredibly chilling and terrifying, and it actually writes vampires in a way as they were meant to be in the first iterations of their existence in mythology, where they are actually legitimately terrifying, and they are this mindless kind of evil, and driven by greed and this bloodlust. And I think it captures that very well with Dracula's character. There's definitely a couple of times in this book where I got a shiver about the way that he was described, or the situation that he was in, or that another character was in with him. One of the things I struggled with a little bit in Dracula was the human characters, actually. Van Helsing was really cool at the beginning of the story when he comes in, and he just got more and more annoying as the story went on and kind of ruined my appreciation for his character, whatever I had from before, which honestly I haven't experienced Van Helsing as a character past this novel and also the Hugh Jackman film, which wasn't my favorite. I think I enjoyed the first half of this novel immensely more than the second half, because we went from this kind of vampire hunter's tense, mysterious terror of the unknown. Oh my gosh, what's a vampire? How are we, like, we're coming face to face with the fact that things like this exist in the world. And then we go into a plot of like Dumb and Dumber. Like, some of the decisions that these characters make, you guys, are so dumb. They're so incredibly dumb, and it was driving me nuts through the second half of this book. And you kind of get to a point, at least I did, in the second half of this book where I was just like, you know, I'm trying not to root for Dracula here, but y'all are being pretty stupid. So yeah, that was my experience reading Dracula. I would recommend this as a fairly accessible classic, probably not the most accessible classic I've ever read. It is a bit slow, but I do think that it's not a dense read for anybody who's interested in trying some more classics. It is very slow burn, and you don't spend a ton of time, as I said, face to face with Dracula, so it's a lot more about the human characters who are pitted against him through the story. But finally got this classic marked off of my classics bucket list, which felt amazing. And I'd love to know down in the comments, if you've read Dracula, let me know your thoughts. I may do a dedicated review for this one on my channel. We'll see. I haven't decided yet. But in general, we got Dracula crossed off the list. All right, guys, really quickly, before I continue on through my list of books from October, I want to tell you guys about a really exciting project that I have coming out, and today is the day that it launches, and I've been sitting on this project for so long, and I finally get to tell you guys all about it, and the Kickstarter is finally live. I am in an anthology with 21 other indie fantasy and sci-fi authors called the Honor Anthology. Every author in this anthology has really outdone themselves in putting out their best work. This is a great way to taste test for new authors that you might really love and to check out more of their work. And huge shout out to Zach Diamanti, who's been hosting this anthology and has really, again, outdone himself in putting everything together. The artwork in the covers, on the edges, inside the book, the illustrations in this anthology, you guys, are absolutely gorgeous. The story that I submitted for the anthology is called The Woodweaver's Rose, and it is a very personal short story about my relationship with my grandfather, and I think that it is one of the most heartfelt things I've ever written in my life, and I would love for you guys to be able to read it. I will put the link to the Kickstarter down below in the description box. Please click it and check out all of the extra information and see all of the beautiful sneak peeks of the covers and the illustrations and all of that. It's really, really a beautiful project, you guys, and I'm so proud to be part of it. Let me know down in the comments if you have any questions about it, but I am just so excited to see this anthology land in readers' hands early next year. And back to our wrap up. So the next book that I read in October was a complete mood read. Like, I bought this book and just decided to read it a few days later, which I haven't done in a really long time, and that felt amazing. And that is Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint, Volume 1. Now, this was originally a webtoon, and I think there's also a graphic novel / manga about it, or manhwa, but this is the light novel. This version of the story is pretty new. The second volume, I think, is coming out in November at some point this month. This is a story about a young man who is dropped into a horrible dystopian game world. It's a lit RPG, basically. And think kind of similarly to Alice in Borderland vibes, mixed with a little bit of Dungeon Crawler Carl, that kind of vein. But it's more towards the darker aspect, like Alice in Borderland, than the more lighthearted humor style of Dungeon Crawler Carl. So I have been trying to dig into lit RPG a little bit more. It's a genre that kind of confuses me sometimes, and I never know how I feel about the level of kind of gameplay mechanics within the story. So I'm pretty picky about what I do and don't enjoy with that. But I actually found this one to be not overwhelming, and it didn't feel like that was overtaking the story. I'm very intrigued by some of the characters so far. It is definitely a book one, so we're just kind of getting our footing and getting to know who's involved and what's going on. But I enjoyed some of the humor in here. It's much lighter than something like Dungeon Crawler Carl, but it was the few moments of humor in here I found very funny. The other thing I really appreciated about this story is it's very self-aware. It calls out some of the tropes and in a very tongue-in-cheek way within storytelling in general, and it directly confronts some of those tropes, and the characters actually call out some of those tropes, which I thought was hilarious, and I really enjoyed that. I do enjoy a self-aware novel that doesn't take itself too seriously from time to time, and this definitely does that. So anyways, that was my experience with Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint Volume 1. I have pre-ordered Volume 2, and I cannot wait to read it later this month. Staying in the manga/manhwa sort of vein, I rediscovered a favorite series this month, and I'm so excited to talk to you guys about it. So way back in high school, I watched the anime Claymore, which is the story of these half-human, half-monster demon hunter women, basically. They're kind of Amazon-esque, and they go from town to town, and they are paid to rid these villages and cities of terrifying people-eating monsters. And I loved the series in visual form back in high school, and a while back I had picked up the first volume of the manga in a half-price books, and I was like, you know what, I wanna dig into that nostalgia a little bit again and just see if the manga is any good. I cannot explain how beautiful that wave of nostalgia was. It was everything I was hoping it would be, and I immediately bought the next 5 volumes. So I was able to get through 3 of the volumes, and I think there's 27 total, which I will be making my way through in the next few months probably. I love this story. I think that it has a lot of heart. It is action-packed. This is definitely an action-packed manga, but it also has a lot of heart, and the way that it explores emotion and ostracization of these characters from normal human society, and yet there are still human characters who reach out to them and remind them of their humanity. There's a character in this story named Irene, if you know, you know, who has lived rent-free in my head for almost 20 years since I saw the anime for the first time, and I cannot wait to reach the point in the manga where she shows up. I'm just absolutely loving this series, you guys, and it has been so much fun to jump back into this world and these characters, and I cannot wait to continue with the rest of the series. So this book, you guys, is not the first book by this author that I have read. However, it is a genre that I typically avoid like the plague for reasons. So this was a book that I wanted to discuss with my husband, because as a happily married couple of 15 years who has done a lot of work to get to the point that we're at, and we're very, very much in love with each other, it just makes for very interesting conversation in some of the tropes and archetypes and storytelling choices of this genre. So Ben and I read Book Lovers by Emily Henry here in October, and I'm not going to tell you guys too much about my thoughts because I'm hoping to do a video later on that delves into that a little bit further. But what I will say about this is I felt like there were 2 books within this book. There was the ramp up to sex book in this story, and then there was the actual story. And I do think that Emily Henry explores some very human, relatable, and important themes within her books. I just personally think that the execution leaves a lot to be desired. And I have a lot of issues with the way that modern romance portrays desirable relationships and the foundation of them. I'm trying to keep it pretty spoiler free and vague because I do want to dig into my thoughts more in a future video, but I am still determined to find a modern romance that I can actually recommend as a good romance. But there's, I don't know, there's so many things. I could say so many things about this book, you guys. And I want to, and I will, but not in this video, because that is something that I'm working on behind the scenes with Ben. So keep an eye out for that. We're still kind of gathering our thoughts, but we will be bringing more of those to you guys in the near future. I was reading a City Watch novel from the Pratchett Discworld this month with my husband Ben, and it wasn't enough Terry Pratchett for the month, so I picked up The Color of Magic, which is a tiny little book, and it is also the first book in the Discworld that he ever wrote. Now, a lot of people say that this book is not a good starting place for Discworld as a whole. A lot of people will tell you that the tone and the setup of the world is still very experimental, like Pratchett hadn't really found his footing in the Discworld yet, and so it doesn't really represent what the Discworld becomes in future books. Which I don't disagree with completely. I do think, though, that this book surprised me with how much I enjoyed it, especially the first half. And I think that kind of wholesome, tongue-in-cheek fantasy humor that Pratchett is so good at is very present in this first book, and especially in the first half and toward the end. The thing that I think I have missed from some fantasy is the joy. The joy of what is possible in the genre, of asking why not, that fantasy is so good at. The sky's the limit kind of fantasy storytelling that I think Pratchett just embodies so well. And I've read some other books in the last couple of years that I would definitely put in this category as well. You know, you've got like Dungeon Crawler Carl, you have Orconomics by J. Zachary Pike. There's a lot of books that are still enveloped in that kind of the joy of fantasy as a genre and just trying things and seeing what works and what sticks. And I love that. I love that a lot. And I think this definitely feels like Terry Pratchett in a sandbox, just kind of playing with the story and this world and figuring out what was going to stick. And he does. And that's why I think the later books in the Discworld are so good. I actually enjoyed this a lot more than I was expecting to, and maybe it was because my expectations were lower that I enjoyed it more. I enjoyed Rincewind's character. He's such a grumpy, like, I just want to go home kind of character, and then putting him in contrast with Two Flower, who is this incredibly eternal, optimistic tourist of a character who is just delightful. I really enjoyed the dynamic between these two characters a lot. So my overall thought about this is, while yes, it doesn't represent exactly the tone of the Discworld as a whole, I do think it still does a great job of introducing the world, and it's really cool what Pratchett, to see kind of the origins of what Pratchett was creating in this series. Next up, I got through another classic, which was a book club pick for my college group of friends, and we get together 4 times a year, discuss different books, and it was Ben's pick this time, and he chose To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, which I had never read, and by way of explanation, because everybody's always like, you didn't read this when you were in school? I didn't read this when I was in school. I was homeschooled, and I did read a lot of classics, but not this one particularly. And so I was going into it completely brand new. The only things I knew about this story was that there was a character named Atticus Finch who everyone loved. I knew that there was a young girl who was kind of the protagonist of the story, and that it was dealing with themes of racism in the 1900s. One of the things I didn't realize, however, is that this was as much of a coming-of-age novel as it is. And I really was impressed by this book. I can completely understand why it's been such a tried and true classic, why so many people talk about it very positively. I think it's interesting to see the very impressive way that Harper Lee walks the line of showing the way life was and the sensibilities of the time, while also challenging them, but letting the characters be a product of their time in a way that invites us to think and discuss and put ourselves in their shoes, as opposed to just this really heavy-handed social commentary. And I love that. I love how she handled this. I think that she really gave us a clear picture of what life was like at this time period in that part of the South. And the way that she showcases Atticus and his fight for justice against a society that is majoritively against him, even though they may agree with him under the surface, but they're still not going to admit it, and they're still going to go against him simply because that's the way things were done kind of mentality, which drives me nuts. But I like that we are getting such a human picture of the lives of these children and how they're growing up in a society like this. And they're being challenged as they're growing up as much as the adults in their story are as well. And I really love that. I loved Atticus Finch as a character. There were a couple decisions he made in here about his children that really I questioned. But overall, I completely understand why he's such a beloved character. I completely understand why this novel is so lauded and why it is read so widely. And I think that that is completely understandable and justified, and I really had a good time finally getting a chance to read it myself. Next up, you guys, I finished my reread of House of Chains by Steven Erikson. I've been reading this since the end of June this year, and I finally finished it. And boy, was that a struggle. I'm not gonna lie. So this is the last of the series that I have previously read. So my next foray into book 5 will be brand new. Never read Midnight Tides before. But I wanted to reread the series before continuing on since it had been so long. And House of Chains, I had forgotten, like some of the other books, so many of the little smaller interactions and details about this book. But I think it is officially my least favorite of the first 4. There's a lot of good stuff in here, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of really important small moments, and also the beginning of this novel, while I cannot stand the character that it represents, I think is incredibly well written. The rest of the book I really struggled with up until the last probably 80 to 100 pages. There are so many characters in this book, you guys. There are so many characters. This cast is enormous, and there's no reason for there to be so many characters. I just started glazing over after a while in this book, and it is completely impossible to keep track of everything. And I feel like while there's a lot of things going on in the 3 books prior to this one was the first one on a reread that felt completely overwhelming to me. And I didn't enjoy myself in this one. And which is sad because there's a character arc that is kind of fulfilled in this book that is one of my favorite things about the series overall. There are some fantastic interactions between some of the beefier characters in this book, and there's a lot of great moments, but I just feel like it gets lost amidst all of the things that are crammed into this book. So I have heard that Midnight Tides is a little bit smaller cast, it's a little bit more cohesive of a novel, and that's honestly what I'm gonna need from Malazan in that book. So I'm really looking forward to that and looking forward to continuing with my first brand new experience with Malazan. And I can't talk too deeply about the events of this book just for spoiler reasons. Obviously it's book 4 in a series, so that's a little tricky, but it is done. My reread is done, finally. House of Chains has been reread, and while I didn't love the experience of rereading it completely, I am just so excited to have kind of given myself a refresh on the first 4 books, and I am ready and raring to jump into Midnight Tides. So, for everybody who's been cheering me on through this series and the reread that has taken me way too long, thank you for being here, and thank you for your patience. We are about to read Midnight Tides, and I cannot wait. Last but certainly not least, my husband and I have been listening to the audiobooks narrated by John Culshaw of Terry Pratchett's City Watch subseries of his Discworld. And this is book 7, Thud, the penultimate book in the City Watch series, and I'm heartbroken that we are almost to the end. We have one more book to read this year, you guys, and then we are completely done with the City Watch. And I'm processing, okay? I'm processing, I'm grieving a little bit, it's fine. But Thud was phenomenal. I know I sound like a broken record at this point with the City Watch books, but I could not love this series more. It is everything that I am wanting from fantasy at this very moment in my life. I love these characters so much, and one of the things that I appreciate about the series the most is it's not just one or two characters that have really stolen my heart. It is this entire package. All of these characters I love so much. So no matter whose scene it is, no matter what is happening in the moment at any given time in the series, I love it, and I love who I'm following, and I can't wait to see what shenanigans they're going to get into, or what mysteries they're going to solve, or what kind of deep themes we're going to be exploring through the lens of social humorous commentary. It's so good, you guys. I absolutely love Thud. I don't know where I would rank this in the City Watch as of yet, but I do intend on doing a video once I am done with all 8 books where I do rank them in order of my favorite to least favorite. But this was another 5-star City Watch book for me, you guys. And I cannot wait to jump into Snuff. I cannot wait to finish the last book in this series and just be able to have read them all and hold them very near and dear to my heart for the rest of my life, because that is where they will stay. All right, you guys, that is finally everything that I read in the month of October 2025. Let me know down in the comments what you guys read this month, what you got up to this month. I feel like I haven't talked to you for a long time, even though it was only a month, and what you're excited about reading next. I hope you are having a phenomenal week. I hope that you are reading some 5-star reads, and I will see you in the next video.